All right, so now we were into the main part of this video where we're learning how to combine two photos into one photo. This is called compositing images or photo merge, all right? And the things that you need to make sure that you're aware of are that when you're picking pictures, you want pictures that are at the same angle, that they're shot in similar light. You don't want something that is like super taken at night and one that's taken in the broad daylight, right? And you want to think about how these two are going to match up in terms of the form, like how the shapes fit together. So I've picked this frog and the orange because they're both sort of have a rounded top edge, right? They have similar forms. The orange has no real front or back, so it's good because it can be, it doesn't matter the angle. So the fact that this frog is sort of 2/3 tilted to us is fine. Now, what we're going to do is, I want the frog to be on top, okay? We're going to lower the opacity of this layer, all right? So what I want to do is in the frog layer, make sure the frog layer is selected, there's 3 little dots beside this. This is an important area because it has the transparency and the blending modes. Blending modes we'll get to later, but the transparency is helpful because we can lower the opacity of the frog just a little bit so that we can now see the orange, so we can scale him appropriately. So he's low opacity, still on the frog layer. I'm going to fixed, transform him, and scale him down until he is about yay big, okay? So that the nose is resting on the top curve, his eyes are coming up above the sphere of the orange, because that's how frog's eyes work. That looks pretty good. I'm then going to come back to this layer, 3 little dots, and just raise up the transparency now that I know that it's fitting. Okay. What we want to do is make sure that things are working the way we want it to in terms of the matching things up. So you can see here that the orange comes up a little bit and it doesn't quite match up on the edge here. So we're going to push around the pixels until those edges match up. Otherwise, it definitely looks like it's gonna look like 2 photos because there's that jagged edge. So I'm coming to my orange layer and we're going to use the liquefy tool. All right, where are we? So liquefy looks like sort of zigzag arrows. This tool is what is used by Photoshoppers frequently to do things like making people really skinny or that sort of thing. But it works for this too, all right? And generally what we want to do is be as subtle as possible. So we're going to use the push. And we're going to just change the size. We can also change the strength depending on what we want to do. And all this does is push pixels around. So if I whoop, you can see it pushes those pixels. Now, so what's happening there is that it's moving the pixels, but I've got a mask on right now on this layer. So I need to accept the changes of the mask so that it is completely, the pixels are gone, okay? So what we're going to do is on the orange layer, see how you see that little scissor? Like that's telling you that the mask is still on there. So basically I'm just pushing it up and the push up is being made invisible because it's going behind the mask. So I'm going to go onto this layer, go to the cutout tool, and I'm going to go to the top control panel. We're going to go to the 3 little dots that say more, and we're going to apply mask. All right, so apply mask. Notice that the scissors are gone. The pixels are now completely gone. And if I go and get my liquefy tool, I can just push pixels around. So excellent. it's really good to have a big brush in here so you're not like stretching things as much. All right, and we want to be subtle about it. Cool. So I'm pushing up so that this corner meets. Excellent. And I'm going to push down between the eyes. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how to combine these. And we're going to be using the mask tool, but we're going to use a specific technique here. So back into the layer. Again, I can always go back into the cutout tool because it's still active on this frog layer. All right. Oops. Let's zoom back in. You can zoom in here too. All right. So whereas I've been using the brush tool with a hard edge and full opacity before to really just get rid of background, now we're going to play with the brush softness and opacity to create a gentle fade with this whole thing. So I'm going to use the brush. I'm going to use, let's say, 130, and the softness I want to be up to 100%. Okay? Step will be 0. So I have a very soft, big brush. I'm going to bring my opacity down to about 30. All right? Now, what happens, oops, is I'm going to go to remove mask, and on this edge, I'm just going to start brushing. And you'll notice that because I have a low opacity soft brush, it's going to have a fuzzy edge, and it's only going to sort of make something transparent. All right? Excellent. So what we're doing is making a slow transition from where this is completely visible to where it is completely invisible. And we want to make that taper slow and gradual so we can't see the line where it starts, where one starts and one fades. If you can point to a line, you're like, that's frog, that's orange, and there's a sharp line in between, that's not what we want, okay? So I'm getting rid of any hard edges, back of the eye here. Excellent. So I'm going a little bit too far here deliberately. So I don't want to see like transparent important bits like eyes over here. That looks pretty bad. So I'm going a little bit too far. I want to get rid of that completely. And then I can go back and add that back in. And I can always go up and harden up my edge if I need to for that particular section. And you can tap as well. All right, so that's about what we're looking for. And you can see I cannot tell the difference between one photo and the other. Excellent. All right, let's talk about this bird. I'm gonna add a wing here. So I'm gonna turn this bird on. Okay, I'm going to bring this bird to the top of the stack. Okay. Now, I want the bird's wing to go the opposite direction. So in my selection tool, I'm going up to the top here. I'm going to flip horizontal. Excellent. And again, I can make this low opacity if I wanted to, but I'm going to come here and rotate it. And I'm going to scale it until it's about the right size that I want. That's looking pretty good. So I'm just adding the wing is what I'm really focusing on. Okay? Excellent. Maybe I'll rotate that just a little bit more. Okay. So from here, what we're going to do is the exact same thing, right? We're going to cut out what we don't want and just use that soft, low opacity brush. I'm going to bring this below the frog head. So that's going to help part of the way, right? And we're going to go into our cutout, okay? And we're going to use remove, brush, big, low opacity. Actually, for the first bit, why don't we just like crank up the opacity? Because I really don't need the feet in there, right? So that's easy. Now here, this is where I want to crank down the opacity to about 30. And start blending it in. It's important that there's a picture below, all right? Otherwise, it just is gonna go to the crazy background back here, right? So you need a lot of overlap for this technique, all right? You need a lot of overlap. So I went too much on the back here. I can see that edge. So I'm gonna switch to add. Okay, so next we want to make sure that the wing is matching the rest of the body. Now, it's a little bit too brown. I want it a little bit more orange. So we can do some adjustments here with levels and colors. So on the wing layer, things that I've done are, I've showed you levels before, which is very helpful. So I can use the blacks, grays, and white points to lighten or darken it up. The orange is pretty light, so I'm just gonna bring the whites up a little bit, all right? And bring the blacks up just a little bit to make it a little bit more contrasty. Okay, there you go. Next up, we're going to try doing a hue and saturation. So hue and saturation is great for adjusting colors, and I'm just gonna move this ever so much to the south, negative 25 it looks like here, negative 19. And you can see that it just goes a little bit more orange, and I can up the saturation just to play with that saturation amount, all right? So making it the way you want, but overall, just matching that orange color just that little bit more. And you could play with the other layers as well. Okay, nice. Now we want to do the sort of final level adjustment, and we only want to do this when we're absolutely 100% sure that we are happy with like all of those nice edges. I would, when you're doing this sort of thing, even check with me before you merge layers, okay? Because this is permanent. You can't go back after a certain point, unlike the cutouts, which are editable. So what we're doing, we're coming over to the frog, the top one. We're clicking on the three little dots again. And you see these like arrows pointing down? Those are the merge layers. So we're going to the one on the left, merge down. It goes one step down. These two are now merged together, okay? We'll do that one more time. So top one, merge down. Excellent. Now, if you had gone to the other ones, merge visible or flatten image, everything's going to get merged. So you will want to make sure that you step back in your history until you can just merge these three layers, okay? Next up, I'm going to show you a couple other ways that you can play with this sort of thing. You can do the clone stamp tool. Clone stamp tool is pretty cool because it only works when you're on the same layer, right? So that's why we merged this up. But if you wanted to bring texture from here, say down over here, we can use that with the stamp tool, all right? What it does is it takes a source. So let's say I wanted to have a third eye on this. I can click the source, which is the eye. It switches automatically into paint, and then I can paint in a third eye. All right, so you can see there. Cool. But you can also play with the opacity and the brush settings again. So let's say I'm gonna switch back into source, Okay, I'm gonna bring some of this, and I'm gonna bring a little bit of that texture down here to unify it a little bit. So I'm gonna got that soft, fully soft, fairly big, low opacity brush, and I can just paint a little bit of that texture sort of down here. And it's important when you're using this to sometimes switch your source, because then it can look too much. All right, but there you have it. You can play with that as well. All right. It's important to not to go too crazy, because again, this is a permanent adjustment, right? You have to don't do like click, 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 click. Otherwise you won't be able to go back in your layers. All right. So there you have it. There is our orange frog. Up next, we're going to be talking about the backgrounds and blending modes, which are really cool.